Does the long-standing historical influence of Christian Zionism have any bearing on why the British government did not acknowledge their promises to the Sharif? You can speak to that.
Well, very much, in the sense that there was, of course, the development of Christian Zionism in Britain with various Protestant groups and so on, including, Lord Shaftesbury. It's a well-known story. And there's no doubt that among the British elite and some of the decision makers at the end of the 19th century and beginning of the 20th century, before the First World War, there was a certain amount of talk and a number of novels written about the potential return of the Jews to the Holy Land and so on and so forth. But when it comes to the actual promises that were made during the First World War, the Asquith government to start with, and then the Lord George government after December 1916, they were all made for military strategic reasons to win the war. Now, if the war had been won or lost by the spring of 1915, and it wasn't because of the massive stalemate and the trenches and everything else like that, there would have been no promise to the Sharif, and there would have been no promise, I don't think, to the Zionists either, quite frankly. The Asquith government had no inclination to promote either Arab nationalism, that they considered a complete chimera anyway, just hypothetical, basically. And apart from Sir Herbert Samuel, who was in the cabinet, apart from him, there was no sympathy or inclination in the British cabinet to promote Jewish nationalism or Zionism or the Zionist case. And the Zionists, of course, were a very small minority of the Jewish community in London and in Germany and elsewhere as well. So in terms of why the Balfour Declaration was implemented and became the mandate policy and the mandate document in 1922, and why the promise to the Arabs was put aside, that is pretty clear in the documents. Basically, to start with, you had a very pro-Zionist prime minister throughout the period to October 1922, David Lloyd George. He was pro the installation of a friendly Jewish community in the southern edge of the Mediterranean in order to protect the Suez Canal. And that's what the Zionists promised him, and that's what Weizmann promised Lord George and Balfour and eventually Churchill in 1921, etc. Just let's get back to 1920. Lord George was not a lover of the Jews, and neither, quite frankly, was Balfour. But they could see the strategic advantage of having allied community because the Arabs had not, and the Arabs of Palestine and generally had been part of the Ottoman Empire for 400 years. They were not buddies with the Christian British, okay, even though the Sharif, for a variety of reasons, had decided to commit treason and to join the British, given the promise of this massive independent Arab state, which the British never particularly thought that they would ever need to honour. But basically, Lord George and Balfour, it was strategic reason. It was not because they had any particular sympathy for the persecuted Jewish people from the pogroms or the immigrants or the Jewish community in Russia or anything else like that. There's nothing that I found in the memoirs or the official archives which indicate that the British elite and the British decision makers during the First World War ever had any particular sympathy for the plight of the Jews.